Hi friends, it's Deanna Williston again with Our Blooming Catholic Life. I'm doing another children's book review for the upcoming holiday season. Again, I bought this book at my local shrine, but this book is actually from taopublishing.com. Now, Tao Publishing is a very, very tiny publishing house. It publishes all Franciscan books by many unknown or very little well-known authors and some really big well-known Franciscan authors. It is such a variety. It is one of the few truly Franciscan publishing houses left, and I really encourage you to support them. They're a very small mom and pop kind of shop, and supporting them does wonders to keep the Franciscan charism and theology alive in our world. So this is one of the simple offerings they have for children, and I think you're going to love it. Let me read from the back. There's actually a description. Our last one had a prayer on the back. This one has a description. This little book offers several episodes from the life of the saint based on the words of Thomas of Celano and St. Bonaventure. They help us understand what the harmony regenerated by love will be like. Whether or not these episodes actually took place is insignificant. I'm guessing that might be some of these from the Little Flowers of St. Francis. I'm not sure. The important thing is to learn how Francis experienced his relationship with creation, and it is easy to see that the poor one lived by seeing God behind all things. So after St. Francis died, like anyone whose cause is open for sainthood, like John Bradburn up here, they have to collect all their writings. They have to interview witnesses. And so some of the people who wrote up those were Thomas of Celano and St. Bonaventure, as well as there's a book that I think is anonymous. We're not sure who wrote it. The Little Flowers of St. Francis. So they're lovely stories. Some of them are good for all different ages. And you can find them. I think we've also reviewed, what I call the chunky monkeys of Franciscanism, the St. Francis, the early documents. Maybe if I can, I'll remember to link that review for you. This book is by Luciano Radi, illustrated by Alessandra Annibali. I apologize if I mispronounced those names. Again, it's by Tao Publishing. It just has a reprint in here of the cover. Oh, right, this is hardback. It's one of the really smooth and silky hardbacks, though. I do love the texture of it. The table of contents is pretty easy to read. It doesn't have the dots going across, but there's a variety of long and short, I don't know if you call them chapters. I guess the stories listed are long and short, so it makes it easier to find them. This is a long one, but then it's medium, short. It's pretty easy to see. Would I appreciate having the dots or the lines going across? Yeah, but it's still pretty easy. The artwork is continued throughout, very lovely, so the kids can be looking at the picture, perhaps while you're reading them the story. I do love that kind of book, right? You get used to, if you're not a school teacher, you may not have done this, where you hold the book up like this so the kids can see the picture, and you kind of hold the words over to you so that you can read the text. Now, this is a lot of text for doing that method, but read it once ahead of time and you'll be able to get through it pretty well. And also with very little kids, if they're just staring at the picture, they're probably not strong readers, so you don't have to read it word for word. But let's look at the introduction. I'll read you a little bit here. I saw you play with the two kittens, Morgana and Circe, cajoling them and making curious little noises to those little animals who responded to your gentleness by purring endlessly. It gave me immense joy. Remember, kids, the big Maremma sheepdog? I feel like this person, from the names, I did wonder if maybe they were from Italy or another country. So I'm guessing, because I don't know the name of this sheepdog. So if you're a parent reading this, you may want to skip the breed of the sheepdog and just say sheepdog. Remember, Kits, the big sheepdog? Every time you came to visit us, he would run up to you, and by yelping and wagging his long, thick tail, he would show you all his love and happiness, which you would return with hugs and kisses. Children and animals have a wonderful relationship of mutual love. Have you ever asked yourselves why? Without resorting to intellectual speculation, we can simply say that there is a spontaneous friendship between children, although this holds true for adults as well, in everything that is alive in nature. And when friends gather together, it's a festive occasion and talk comes easy. So this introduction is maybe not meant for young children. This is really interesting, though, because it has the pictures and you could read it. I would I would go ahead and read it yourself and maybe make this a little bit easier. So it starts out, maybe this book was written specifically for someone's grandchildren or nieces or nephews from the writing. So I would encourage you, to go ahead and read this first ahead of time. Otherwise, that jump from I saw you doing this and that to switching, you're going to want to be prepared for that. But this is interesting. Nature is based on widespread interdependency. Each living being is related to all other ones and cannot survive alone. Men and animals were created to be together. So they're going into some theology here. In the words of Enzo Bianchi, in the relationship with God, if animals were the victim needed to place man before sin and salvation, then by taking man's place before God within them, they must surely have had the inspiration that made their pain and their blood worthwhile. I don't know. I've never heard some of this before. Over on page 3, it tells us, the prophet Isaiah tells us how things were in our world and how they will be again. The wolf shall be a guest of the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid. The calf and the young lion shall browse together with a little child to guide them. The cow and the bear shall be neighbors. Together their young shall rest. It goes on. Because of this perfect union with God, St. Francis was able to learn and experience this new reality, for he had made his bodily substance so tenuous through love and penance. The poor one experienced the promise of Isaiah within himself, and he left us an important lesson to teach us the kind of relationship we must seek to establish with nature. Again, I'm saying don't get stuck on the natural one. You can see they give us the supernatural relationship when they're talking about animals were used as victims in ancient Jewish tradition, right? So they're talking about that. That's kind of a supernatural element to it right there. So don't get stuck in the natural element. We want to be in the supernatural element. So this book offers several episodes from the life of the saint based on the words of Thomas of Celano and Saint Bonaventure. They help us understand what the harmony regenerated by love will look like. Oh, wait. This is from the back. Oh my goodness. This is from the back of the book as well. Thus, when we approach an animal, not only must we respect it, but we must love it. Men have not been called to subdue the earth, rule over the fish in the sea, the birds in the air, and every living creature that slithers or treads on it, but to live on it, cultivate it, and enrich it with his labor in a relationship of love. Today, many of us no longer respect or love nature. The environment has been seriously wounded. It is extremely urgent that we recreate the balance that has been lost. At this point, it is the very development of technology that teaches us, and this is a great worth, that our planet is the only system founded on general interdependency. What happens in America affects the other 4 continents. Through satellites and television, what happens in the most secluded village of the Sahara becomes an event that can trouble and move all humanity. All nations constitute a system of communicating vessels. We cannot postpone establishing the rules for living together on the planet. If these rules are not set forth with full awareness of their complexity, it will be difficult to avoid destruction of the global system. Let's not fool ourselves. Technology alone is not enough to achieve this massive project to restore the harmony that has been lost. If this were enough, only a few technocrats would have a role to play, and the rest of us would be a useless added burden, a wormhole filled with zombies. Supposing now that this book is not for children, at least not the introduction. An immense and macabre throng of lifeless people who eat and consume. As John Paul II has repeated time and time again, the great power that can reverse the current trend that is noiselessly and perceptibly leading us towards slavery is the power of love. If people can once again love flowers, animals, rivers, seas, mountains, and forests, they will also love themselves and each other, and they will turn technology into a powerful tool to promote an even higher human balance. They will exalt their hard-working presence on earth and their personal dignity and their freedom, and they will live together peacefully as they await the fulfillment of time. This is the lesson that St. Francis of Assisi has taught us. I don't know that St. Francis taught us that technology is needed to restore balance and harmony. I'm not sure about that introduction, friends. That is very much a view of some Franciscans, and I'll admit that takes it out of being a children's book, but it may just be the introduction. So let's go ahead, and you could simplify that message for them, but that is explicitly what's written here. Let's look at the little book, little story St. Francis preaches to the birds. Let's examine one of the stories and see what it's like. The swallows had arrived after a long journey across the Mediterranean. They wheeled about, circling in the sky and cutting through the air with their shrill cries. There was no other creature that can show us such dizzying and joyous flights. Accompanied by Brother Macias and Brother Angelus, Francis was preaching in the square in the town of Canera, a few miles from his beloved Porciuncula. The townspeople had gathered together, coming even from nearby castles, and they were listening to his words with interest and marvel after overcoming their initial misgivings. The swallows passed over them again and again, flying between the Topino River and the gate known as Lumigiano, making so much noise with their twittering that Francis stopped in the middle of his talk. He looked up towards the sky and said, "My sister swallows, now it's my turn to speak, since you have spoken quite enough until now. Listen to the word of God and keep quiet and still until my speech is over." The swallows stopped flying and screeching. They settled down in 100 different places, suspended in midair, and they listened attentively. On the frames of houses, along the modillions of the towers, and on the windowsills, their white breasts shone in the sunlight. Which is interesting because this picture doesn't seem to have anything at all to do except it's St. Francis and the birds, but it doesn't really go with the story, but you could hold it up. And so they listened together, men and birds, to the impromptu sermon, united by the very same fervor and the same emotion. When the saint finished talking, he set out again on his journey. A retinue of men and women came to follow him on the path of poverty and sacrifice, ready to leave behind all their possessions and loved ones for renewal and resurrection in the miraculous light that the words of St. Francis had revealed to them. Francis's heart trembled before these results. What he had thought was that the exceptional and personal fruit of a state of grace was spreading, and it was becoming a condition and a rule for community life. The few who had followed him were becoming many, and he was faced with a new and important problem. It was at this time that Francis thought of the Third Order and decided to establish it. With his brothers, Francis left Canera and took the road to Bavagna, crossing wheat fields and flowering orchards. He stopped at the flatlands that even today local farmers refer to as Pien de Area. The area was surrounded by a mighty oak tree, and Francis, whose attention was drawn by frantic twittering, raised his eyes and saw a multitude of birds on the leafy branches. He called out to the birds, and they immediately left the tree to sit around him in a circle on the ground, so close to him that they could touch his robe. So here's where we have it. So this is the part that goes with, not the one on the page before. This is the middle of page 7, and this is on page 6. A clear sky illuminated that idyllic scene marked by faith and poetry, and everything was pure, simple, and innocent. Francis told them, "My brother birds, listen to the word of the Lord. You have great reason to praise your Creator. He has given you feathers to cover you, feathers to fly, and he has allowed you to live in the clear sky. He provides for all your needs without any great effort on your part." As he said these words and others like them, the birds stopped where they were and remained still for the entire sermon. It was a marvelous sight to see how these little creatures manifested signs of exultation with their movements. They stretched out their necks, they spread their wings, they opened their beaks, and they kept their eyes fixed steadily on the extraordinary orator who strolled back and forth among them. Not only were they afraid of him, but he appealed to them in a unique way, for the poor one and the little songbirds quivered with the very same joy. Indeed, Francis resembled those birds, light and free. Like them, he owned nothing, and entrusted himself to the providence of God for all his bodily and spiritual needs. Poverty sets you free. It gives you wings to soar to the kingdoms of heaven. It allows you to express the love that is the language uniting all the creatures of the universe. Speech, which is a code invented by mankind, is exalted to an inspiration that communicates feelings and emotions to all living creatures. Sorry about that, friends, if you can hear my phone ringing. Nothing I can do about that. So the book does seem to then follow the stories that are in the early documents, which is lovely. At the end is a bibliography. It doesn't say that it came from... Now this is interesting. It has a bibliography and then the sources. I'm not sure what the difference is there. What would be the difference? Is the bibliography recommended books and then the sources are the ones used? Well, that's confusing. But they don't reference the early documents. They have the English Omnibus of Sources for the Life of St. Francis, edited by Marion Habig. So this was probably printed. Was there a printing? No. Oh! My pages were stuck together. This was 2007 and 2015, so maybe it was just before the early documents came out. I'm not sure. 2007, maybe. So I don't know. I can't speak to that. I don't understand the difference between the bibliography and the sources. I've never seen a book have both of those in the back. There are, including those last pages, it is a 43-page book. Let me go back and read you some of the other story titles. Again, I'm not sure what age this is for. That introduction does make me wonder. It's an odd inclusion. Otherwise, I would say it's a children's book until you got there. That's a bit intense for little kids. So we have St. Francis preaches to the birds. The tench expresses its gratitude. Sister Cricket's song. His special love for lambs. Even the asses participate in the Christmas festivities. The crow eats with the brothers. Even worms deserve our mercy. The evil sow. The greedy robin redbreast. The wolf of Gubbio. Brother ass. The hawk that roused Francis. The larks sing their jubilant mourning at Francis's death. So it does take you through St. Francis's ministry into his death. It's interesting that it included some of the Third Order. There's lovely little pictures throughout. You have to love, even at the beginning of the chapters often, and then throughout the stories. Each story seems to have just one picture. The artwork is enchanting. It's a little silly at times. Look at the Wolf of Gubbio. That's a little silly. So definitely, I have mixed feelings about this book. I'm not sure that the age that it's asked for. This could be something to read to maybe your older kids so that you could try and work out some of those harder Italian words in there, as well as I'm not sure what to do with that introduction, what age of kid that's really appropriate for, or if you want to skip that. So this could still be a read aloud book. This could be a great one to read to kids at bedtime. Of course, not the introduction. That's a little intense. But interesting. As an adult, it's a much better book. It's an easier way to read some of the stories of St. Francis. So that's nice. It's an easy to read print. I'm not sure why all the page numbers have these flowers with them. I think publishers think they're being cute and adorable, and they don't realize it makes those numbers harder to see and read. Tons of publishers do that. I'm not a fan of that. You know that. So St. Francis and the Animals, it is recommended with some reservations. Again, Tau Publishing is a very small publishing house, so consider buying directly from them or from your local shrine. Please, if at all possible, and I know some of you live in the middle of nowhere and you really can't help but order from the big mega online stores. But if you can't afford it and it's possible for you, order directly from taupublishing.com or from your local shrine or parish. May God bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. And may the Lord bless you. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Bye, friends.